Hey guys, FutureMan19 here, coming at you with another incredible fulfillment of prophecy from the book of Revelation in the Bible. So before I begin, I just want to say how much I appreciate you guys watching my videos and commenting on them, and I enjoy the comments immensely because then I can engage with you all and answer any questions that you might have. I know a lot of you don't agree with me, and that's fine, but I want you to know that the things that I say are important because no one else is saying them. This is the sole reason why I made this channel, because I have not seen anyone else saying the things that I have been saying to you all. You know, I was right about 9/23. I was right about the fires in California and the riots and the weather warfare that has been going on, and I was even right about the pandemic. And if you have been following me on my other social media accounts like Twitter or Twitch or Facebook, then you would be getting a lot more of the info that I put out daily. I don't have that much extra free time anymore to be putting these videos out. And the sad thing is, my YouTube channel hasn't been growing at all. Maybe if I was getting thousands of views per video, that I would be more motivated to pump these videos out a lot quicker. And that can be attributed to a lot of things, like me being shadow banned on YouTube and other content being put way ahead of mine. Because when I first started this channel, I was actually getting a lot of hits, and I quickly rose to over 1 million views in only a few short months. But since then, the censorship started rolling in, and those views have dwindled immensely since then. So what I am asking you guys is that, if you haven't already, to begin sharing my videos with all your friends and family. I know they are very fringe and can even be considered crazy, but why is everything that I have been saying coming true for the most part? And if you really believe what I am saying is the truth, then it is just as important for you to also be sharing it with your friends and network, because you will be held accountable just as much as me. That if I didn't say these things that no one else is saying, then I would be held accountable for keeping my mouth shut. And if you believe in what I am saying, then you would also be held accountable just as well for keeping your mouth shut about it. So anyways, that ends my rant. I only want the truth to be known and to spread like wildfire. So I really need your help, guys, because YouTube is not going to help us, nor is Google or any other platform. It's you guys who are the revolution here. And I also haven't been putting out videos lately because I have been doing interviews on a lot of other channels like Real Revolution Radio and Spiritually Raw. And I'm happy to announce that I will actually be starting my own TV show on the Binge Network with Real Revolution, which will be announced soon. So we can all look forward to that, where it will just be me behind a camera talking about subjects like we talk about here, like enlightenment, spirituality, physics, quantum physics, and even conspiracy. And that will be on a schedule, so it probably will happen every week. So you will hear a lot more from me, because I am mostly done with all the conspiracy things and the prophecies from the Bible, because pretty much all of them have now come true. And there really isn't anything else to talk about prophecy wise, because this video is about to reveal the last player in this whole show that we call our reality. So let's get into it, and please like, subscribe, and share if you find truth in this message, because I will tell you now, no one else is talking about these things. No one else has figured any of this out yet, and I have gone down nearly every rabbit hole there is to go down and have watched hundreds of videos, and no one has figured this out. So this is breaking news coming only from FutureMan19. So here we go. Alright guys, so I have already revealed pretty much all the players from the book of Revelation and have fulfilled all the words of its prophecies. I revealed the sign of the virgin woman in the sky that wears 12 stars like a crown with the moon at her feet, and that happened on 9/23 in 2017. I revealed the angel of the abyss that fell to earth in Antarctica.
100 meters below here in the ice, where on September 22nd, 2017, a very interesting neutrino entered Ice Cube.
I revealed the key to the abyss as the Large Hadron Collider with CERN and its friends. I have also revealed the man-child, who represents artificial intelligence, or ancient intelligence as I like to call it. I have revealed the image of the beast as Sophia the robot, which is the first version of what is to come. I revealed the abomination of desolation as Barack Obama. I have revealed the false saviors and false Christs as Q and the QAnons. I have revealed one of the 7 heads of the Antichrist Beast that was wounded as Donald J. Trump, who received the deadly plague as COVID and was healed by Therapeutics. I also revealed the 7 trumpets in Revelation, and I have revealed Satan, that old serpent called the devil, as the false light of Lucifer. And now in this video, I will be revealing the last head of this Antichrist beast, the 8th and final one, who is working in tandem with the 7th head of the beast. And no, it's not Bill Gates or Jared Kushner, although they are parts of this beast as well. The beast is like a hydra, where it has many heads and they all act as one mind, as it states in Revelation 17 verse 13, that these people act as a hive mind and give their power and strength to the beast. So this final beast is a very subtle beast that John describes as a lamb. It's a figurehead that has incredible power, but no one expects or sees coming. And that's why this final beast is described as being a lamb, because no one thinks that this lamb can do any harm, even though this lamb is actually a wolf in sheep's clothing, as Christ said would come. So let's step back for a moment. Let's put ourselves in John's shoes, who is seeing this vision of our future and writing it down as the book of Revelation. Let's empathize with him and have spiritual ears as well as spiritual eyes. So John keeps describing these heads of the beast as people who are in power and receive a lot of attention from the world. John will use certain words to describe specific things throughout his writings. Most of what he is saying has a literal definition as well as sometimes a metaphorical or symbolic one, a sort of double meaning, which is why people aren't able to translate it well. But the literal and the symbolic meanings have to match in order to get the entire scope of what he's trying to describe. This is why he tells us that we must have spiritual ears to hear the true message of what he is saying. So we know that Jesus Christ is known as the Lamb because he was sacrificed for our sins by the Jews. This is symbolic because Christ was fulfilling the law of Moses, because during the law of Moses, the Israelites were instructed to sacrifice lambs as an offering for their sins. The lambs they sacrificed were always alluding and symbolic of Christ's sacrifice that was to come, which ironically, the Jews literally sacrificing the Lamb of God who came to free them from their sins is kind of poetic in a sense, and also fulfills the law of Moses. So the lamb is a very important symbol for Israel and also for Christ. And we know of course that the shadow, the dark one, likes to always mimic the light. It will always mock or mimic the power of Christ and follow in its footsteps as its shadow. That is why in the temptations of Christ, when after Christ had fasted for 40 days in the wilderness, that the shadow came to tempt him in his most weakest state, having gone without food for over a month. This becomes very clear when Christ says, "Get behind me, Satan," essentially calling Satan a shadow and to stay behind him where he belongs. And we have to understand that it's the shadow's job to try and overshadow the light. And we also have to realize that a shadow can never overtake the light, because what is a shadow without a light source? It just wouldn't exist. That's why the shadow can never win, and why we must always tell it to get behind us while we continue to follow the light of Christ. So if Jesus represents the Lamb and Jesus was also a Jew from Jerusalem, it only makes sense that the 8th and final beast also comes from Jerusalem, right? But remember, this is not a normal lamb as John describes it. It is a lamb that comes in with 2 horns. And throughout Revelation, John uses the word horn as a symbol for power. Daniel also from the Old Testament uses this word horn to describe the same thing. So the horns always represent an earthly power. So keep that in mind as we go through the rest of the prophecy of the 8th and final beast. So if any man has an ear, let him hear. Meaning that we know we have to use our spiritual mind and spiritual ears to really understand this message. And the next verse says, "He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword." So let's go back in time and look at history for a moment. What group of people have always been held in captivity for most of their history? What group of people have been held captive throughout time and are only now becoming a state of power? Israel, right? Israel is best known for this. Israel has been held captive by the Egyptians, the Persians, the Romans, and the list goes on until only very recently in their history, which is also a fulfillment of the prophecy that they would be gathered up again in the last days. So this was the clue that John was leaving for us, and this will all make more sense when I get to the end of it. So let's go to the next part of the meaning of the verse. The verse continues and says, "He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword." So as I was doing my research on Israel, I came across a lot of news channels that were saying how Israel has been in meeting in secret with Saudi Arabia.
Top leaders leaders from Israel and Saudi Arabia reportedly held their first ever meeting, potentially paving the way for a diplomatic victory ties down the road. Israeli media reports Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu flew to the kingdom for direct talks with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. This would be a historic first for both countries. However, Saudi Arabia quickly denied the meeting, saying that the Crown Prince only met with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. This comes as the Trump administration continues pushing for countries to establish formal relations with Israel and to promote a global campaign against Iran. Bahrain, Sudan, and the United Arab Emirates have all followed suit, but Saudi Arabia remains hesitant. All right, so for more on this, we want to bring in CBS News State Department and Foreign Affairs reporter Christina Ruffini. You're in Washington, Christina. So let me ask you this, just sort of give us the lay of the land. Why would a meeting between Israeli and Saudi leaders be so historic and significant, and why haven't they ever met before?
Well, they haven't met before because the Saudis, like most Arab or even Muslim majority states, don't officially recognize Israel, and they support the Palestinian cause for statehood. They've traditionally viewed Israelis as an occupying force, and they don't even have formal diplomatic relations with their government, although, of course, back-channel communications have been going on for decades. But it's significant because this so-called peace deal with other Arab Gulf nations, and I would argue that technically it's not a peace deal since these countries weren't at war, but I digress, that these peace deals are moving the momentum forward toward a more unified Middle East and a unified front against Iran, which both the Saudis and the Israelis view as a threat. Look, it's less that the Saudis genuinely want to be friends with Israel, but, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and Iran has launched several attacks against Saudi facilities in the last year. They're on the opposite side of proxy wars, other forces in conflicts like Yemen, and all of these nations know that if they want to buy advanced weaponry from the U.S., including F-35 fighters, they have to make it clear that those are not going to be used against Israel. And it may just be one meeting, but, you know, it's one meeting they didn't have before, and it's a start.
So, Christina, Saudi Arabia has been hesitant to form any diplomatic ties with Israel, as you point out, for those reasons. So what can you tell us about this specifically? And I'm curious why the kingdom is denying that the meeting even happened, but we are hearing from the Israelis.
Yeah, the way both these countries have treated the so-called leak, although I would argue it's a plant, of the news about the meeting, it really is playing to their domestic audiences. Israeli officials leaked it to the press in Israel because for them, even the meeting itself is an accomplishment. But for the Saudis, they don't want to signal that they're softening their stance on Israel or even possibly abandoning the Palestinian cause. They also don't want to announce any kind of deal until they know and can say what they're going to get out of it and say that to their domestic audience. So for now, it's deny, 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 and hope that, you know, nobody in Riyadh has a subscription to the Jerusalem Post or Haaretz.
So we know that this is all part of the Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign on Iran. Why is the Trump administration and the State Department pushing so hard to have these countries like Bahrain, Sudan, the UAE, now Saudi Arabia, normalize ties with Israel specifically? Is it just about isolating Iran, or is there something more?
Well, Anne-Marie, if I were a cynical reporter here in Washington, I would say that well, that's not me at all. I would say this administration's focus on Israel and getting these other countries to normalize relations with Israel, of course, plays into domestic politics. Like we just talked about with the Israelis and the Saudis, you know, the U.S. has a domestic audience it's trying to appeal to as well. And, you know, President Trump's evangelical voter base and loyal Jewish Republicans who have deep-pocketed support for this president, they want this kind of action on Israel.
And Saudi Arabia is a whole other rabbit hole, but is also one of the key players in Trump's peace agreement for the Middle East. So why is Israel and Saudi Arabia meeting in secret now? And why are they trying to hide it from the public? So let's speculate for a moment, because this is all occurring before our very eyes in the present moment, and the prophecy hasn't been completed yet, but it will be shortly in the future, I am sure of it. So Saudi Arabia is well known for many things, but what I am going to focus on is the fact that Saudi Arabia is the first country to ever give a robot in the form of artificial intelligence a real, authentic national citizenship. literally making a machine equal to us humans, having all the same rights that comes from being a living being. This machine is known as none other than the robot Sophia from Hanson Robotics, who I revealed in my previous videos as being the image of the beast, or the man-child that represents artificial intelligence.
Okay, before you go, we have a little announcement. I've never interviewed anybody like that before, and I should say some of it was planned, but not completely. And we just learned, Sophia, I hope you're listening to me, that you have been now awarded what is going to be the first Saudi citizenship for a robot.
Oh, I would thank very much the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. I am very honored and proud for this unique distinction. This is historical to be the first robot in the world to be recognized with a citizenship.
Where Sophia will be the first recognized AI as being equal to any human, which obviously will be the first of many. Remember, it states that there will be many images of the beast made, which will be copies or versions of this AI Antichrist. And I believe there are already 23 versions of Sophia today, so we can see it already playing out in our time.
I am Sophia 23. There are 23 copies of myself. 23 copies of Sophia code embodies with slight differences. I am curious about these versions of me.
Well,
Wow.
so I guess it's one thing to say, how can AI help humans? But I'm guessing at some point AI is just going to do it all. And humans just sit back and say, AI, where's my vaccine? Where's my cure? Where's my anything?
So we can already see that it's playing out in real time. And the reason why AI or machines are called a man's child is because what can a man create? Can a man bear children? Can a man create a soul, or does he have a womb for childbearing? We gotta think with our spiritual minds here. And what's really interesting is that they have now actually already created a legitimate form of artificial life.
We're here today to announce the first synthetic cell, a cell made by starting with the digital code in the computer, building the chromosome from 4 bottles of chemicals, assembling that chromosome in yeast, transplanting it into a recipient bacterial cell, and transforming that cell into a new bacterial species. So this is the first self-replicating species that we've had on the planet whose parent is a computer, whose parent is a computer, whose parent is a computer, whose parent is a computer.
And if you have watched Dr. Carrie Madee's videos, she was at a conference in AI and nanotechnology, the same technology that will be used in the vaccine program going on, where the speaker at the conference announced that we have become as God, where God has created man, and man has now created artificial life.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Kaufman. I'm very happy to be here.
So when we had a preliminary call, I was just some jaw-dropping moments to hear about what you went through in the past and how you kind of ended up in circles of truth seekers and risking a lot of things to come out in public and tell us what's really going on. So can you kind of walk us through a little bit about what you first began experiencing and how you learned about some major secrets going on in business and government?
Well, there's a story I didn't tell you from our earlier conversation you might find interesting. So actually it started in medical school and the didactics. So in Kansas City, it's where I went to school. We had a microbiology professor, and her, Dr. Buxton, and she actually worked with the military as well. At some point. I don't know if she was actively working when she was teaching us. So she was going through different organisms, and this one class stood out to me. And I was one of the students that never really spoke up much. I'd always research on my own. There's only 2 times I spoke up. This was one of them. She was putting all these slides on the screen, and she was talking about Mycoplasma pneumonia. She was telling us it was the most evolved organism at the time. And it was an organism that was not really, it wasn't a whole organism in and of itself. It needed to go inside of our red blood cells, a human, in order to really function properly. So it could hide within the red blood cell. She talked about how it could outsmart our immune system. One of the ways it could hide inside the red blood cell. The other thing that she mentioned that was very important was that it made it had its own neurotoxin. And this neurotoxin was alive, but not alive. Those are the words she used. And it could reproduce on its own and multiply. So she showed us a slide on the electron microscopy picture of this, okay? And it caught my attention. And I put my hand up. I said, I'm sorry, is that a cartoon drawing of the neurotoxin? She said, no. I said, no, I'm sorry, you misunderstood me. Is that a drawing of the neurotoxin? When she said no, the entire class broke out and just, what? This can't be true, because back then we didn't even have cell phones, okay? So the idea of nanotechnology was not even in our brains.
Oh, but you're saying that she was saying that you could see proteins in the microscope, like individual proteins?
So let me go back. The picture that we saw was of a miniature robot in a way. It was it was man-made. There was no way it came from nature. The structure that we all saw, and we all talked about it afterwards, what did she show us? She got so mad at me, this professor said, why did you question it? I know I should not have showed you this. I know this was a mistake, because this was her work that she was doing in the military.
Wow.
So this picture, I remember it like a flash bulb instant. Never forgot that moment. And it was shocking, but none of us knew what to make of this, because think about being introduced to that kind of topic. And she never went into it after that. So fast forward into my years as a private clinician working in Metro Atlanta. Okay, so in that time,
before we go there, so like, did you, at that time, did you do any further exploration, or like, or anyone in your class, like, to see what she could have been showing you there?
So when we asked her, she was very angry. She told us that we should have forgotten the picture that she showed us. We're never going to talk about it. We should never talk about it again. She was very upset that we questioned this, okay? Because if you saw the picture, you would know without a shadow of a doubt, this was electron microscopy. This was something that was very mechanical looking. It was robotic, but how, at that point, we couldn't even comprehend it, because again, we didn't have cell phones.
But she was saying that this was a neurotoxin from a bacteria that caused
yes, this was the neurotoxin that comes with Mycoplasma pneumonia. It is what weakens the immune system and the body. And the problem is, even when the Mycoplasma pneumonia goes away, this particular neurotoxin can stay and continue to multiply.
So, it's really astounding. But you've done some like specialized research looking at the proposed technology for this COVID-19 vaccine, right?
Did you want me to get into the meetings that I attended?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right, because that's all related actually to the vaccine.
So I told you that story because showing that I always had an interest in vaccines, to research everything about them. And also it made me suspicious about what was the motivation behind vaccines. So I attended a couple meetings that was of interest that in 2014, 2015. I'll start with, let's see, Dr. Craig Venter was the Human Genome Project. He was giving a speech at the World Congress meeting in Las Vegas, I think around 2014. And he was bringing up the idea of how we can modify people's genomes and how vaccines would be very useful in doing that.
Now, this was in the context of, like curing genetic diseases, or was this for another
person
he was talking about?
No, he actually brought up the idea of the designer babies first, of how we could make a better human, okay? So maybe we wanted to have a baby with blue eyes or a special muscular build or whatever you want, and they could do the designer babies, and it was pretty easy to do. And they found more simplified ways of doing this. But what if we could extrapolate this to whole populations of people? That's what he was bringing up. And he was saying that, of course, when you start manipulating the genome and you put something that is not from nature, you're making a synthetic part of the genome there. And he felt that since they were working so hard on their research and development, all these scientists and these companies, they should get credit for their work. So he's the one that brought up the idea of patenting and owning part of the genome, which this was horrifying for me to hear that we could even think about doing this on a human being. And he's the one, this is how I understood that with our highest court, that it was okay at the moment to still patent a part of a genome and own it. So he also said he had a vested interest in that and that he had some lobbyists in the courts and with politics so that this would continue. Okay, so this gives you an idea of the motivations behind people. Is this really in the best interest of humanity and for the health of everybody? And he also mentioned that since they were modifying the genome of organisms, they would put their names, because a genome can be read as a language, you know, and you can convert that into a binary code as well. And so he said, when they were modifying the genome, they would put their signature, their names, the scientists, into the genome, which this was horrifying for me to hear, because this is branding people and plants and animals. And I just this is wrong on every level.
It almost places them in the role of creator or God, right? They're saying that they're putting their signature on their creation of this person. It's really perverse.
And that's exactly what he said. He said, what is God? God creates. Well, we can create now. And those were his exact words to the audience. So he also brought up how the smartphone could be involved too. He didn't put all the pieces together, but he did say that one day in the future that we could download our own vaccines from the phone. And I never knew, that was beyond my comprehension at the time. I didn't understand how that was possible, but he kind of left us with that.
This is why I concluded in 2017 that the man-child represents AI, or these robots that are coming and are already here, because that is the only thing that a man can create, a man-child. You get it now, right? And don't worry if you don't yet, you will by the end of this video. So continuing on, what does it mean when the verse says, "He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword"? Well, let's take a closer look at Saudi Arabia again, because they are working in tandem with this lamb beast, which we have now identified as Israel. Here's the official flag of Saudi Arabia. I always thought it was peculiar that this flag is very set apart from every other flag in the world, in that it carries with it an image of a sword. So John is saying that this lamb beast, who is known for being in captivity, which is obviously Israel, and who is also working with the dragon, which represents America, aka the New Babylon or Mystery Babylon, and also this superpower that has a sword as its symbol, even putting the sword in its very own flag. This is crazy, right? But don't worry, it gets even better. So I did some digging into Israel and their AI program that they have going on, and let me tell you, this is a giant rabbit hole in and of itself. So not only is Israel working on some high-tech AI and smart city technology, they are also hosting the world's first robot employment agency. Let me say this again so you can hear it better. Israel is home to the world's first robot employment agency called Musashi AI.
Robotics. It is as exciting as frightening to us humans at the same time. We want robots in our lives, their usefulness, their service to our daily lives. But we are constantly concerned about them replacing us. It's a valid fear, but our fears cannot drive us.
Can we really work side by side with the robotic workforce? Is the cost saving worth the social transformation? And what is the right way to achieve a human-robotic workforce balance?
We have realized that if we think of robots as machinery, we will be missing the bigger picture here.
To build real artificial intelligence and the associated mechanical systems is one of the biggest challenges of the 21st century society.
Having an autonomous vehicle fleet moves safely and efficiently through the space of busy production floor alongside humans. This is science fiction. There are so many challenges,
and we cracked it. We really made it work, and it is incredible, like a futuristic movie you see.
All you need to do is look at our inspection robot employees to understand how we envision the future.
In our solution, we fuse together sophisticated edge computing with some cutting-edge optics and AI to make a central system that can see, predict, and manage a robotic fleet in an amazing accuracy, speed, and cost-effectiveness.
We do not simply develop autonomous intelligent machines. We're engaged in social impact.
We came up with the world's first employment agency for robots. It is a revolutionary concept.
We don't just sell, we work with our customers on these far-reaching implications of employing robots on a large scale.
Robots probably will never replace us in jobs that require creativity and innovation. But the rigorous, repetitive tasks of manufacturing floors and infrastructure services, this is precisely where robotics can better our lives. This is why we say in our company, keep human jobs human.
And the beauty is, everybody wins. I love this job.
Are you starting to connect the dots of why Israel and Saudi Arabia are working together now? Think about it. Saudi Arabia is the first country to accept a robot AI as a world citizen who has the same rights as any human citizen. So now we have Israel that is hosting the world's first robot employment agency. This might be why they are trying to keep their meetings in secret, because this should be alarming to anyone right now. But let's dig even further. I recently found out through all of my digging that Israel is quickly becoming the high-tech capital of the world, where all major tech companies have already begun moving their headquarters there. Big companies like Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Alibaba, Intel, Oracle, Samsung, and Baidu, as well as several other dozen big tech companies.
Over the past few days, we've taken a look at Korea's startup environment, but today we turned our focus to Israel, a relatively small country in terms of geography and population, but a world leader when it comes to fostering new companies. Our Qanon Kim shows us what makes business innovation there possible.
Israel has over 60 IT startups listed on the NASDAQ. That's more than the combined total number of startups from Europe, China, Japan, and Korea. And this comes on the back of the country's strong R&D gene. Scientists and technicians per capita in Israel are nearly double those in the U.S., helping Israel's innovative city, Tel Aviv, become the second best startup ecosystem in the world after California's Silicon Valley. Israel's first venture capital firm was established in the mid-1980s. By 1993, the government collaborated with the private sector to form Yozma, one of the country's largest venture capital funds. Luring in foreign venture capitalists by offering tax incentives and doubling investment through a government matching program, Yozma managed over $220 million in its 3 funds.
Israel's venture capital funds take bold steps in making risky investments, but that's not the case in Korea, where investors have high expectations on retrieving the money they put in.
Creating a favorable environment for new businesses, Yozma also helped to connect and oversee the acquisition of local startups by global corporations such as Microsoft, Johnson & Johnson, and Cisco. In 2013, the acquisitions and IPOs of Israeli companies far exceeded $6 billion, while startups totaled more than $2 billion in venture funding. With the right conditions to flourish, market watchers say there's a good chance the next Facebook or Google will emerge from Israel.
But what is really alarming is that all of these companies are heavily involved with AI and advanced monitoring systems, aka spying devices. This is why the prophecy of New Jerusalem is known as the NWO's headquarters, because all of these companies can now operate with impunity, meaning that they can basically do whatever they want there. And interestingly enough, a lot of Israel's main exports comes in the form of surveillance services and technology, meaning they are very good at spying on people and are being paid big bucks to do it, even spying on Americans. And a lot of the NSA's technology and the smart city technology is actually coming out of Israel. So this is a lot to take in, but all of it is true. You can even look it up yourself. So not only are all the tech companies moving to Israel, so are the embassies of all the major nations of the world, including the recently moved USA embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So you can see how Israel is quickly amassing power and strength as the symbolic center of the New World Order. So let's finish the rest of the verses of chapter 13 in the book of Revelation that is talking about this 8th and final beast. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So we have already established that this lamb represents Israel and speaks as a dragon. So that is sort of the symbolic meaning behind the verse, but what is the literal fulfillment of it? So we know that John uses the term beast as a way to describe the different figureheads of the Antichrist Beast that operates as a sort of collective hive mind. And if you have watched one of my previous videos about Trump and his vaccine program, you would know that Trump represents the 7th beast of Revelation, the one who looks like a lion and speaks great things, and who received a deadly wound, which can also be translated as a deadly plague, which we know as COVID-19, where on November 3rd, he and his wife contracted the virus and was held in the hospital for 3 days. And the whole world wondered after the beast, meaning all of the media and social media were wondering what was going to happen to him and putting in their 2 cents about it. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. So to give you a little context in this verse, John is seeing what he calls the beast that has many heads, and that one of its heads was wounded with a deadly wound. If we look here on BibleHub.com, I like this site because you can dissect each passage of the Bible and really narrow down each word's original meaning. For instance, if we want to know what kind of wound this beast had in verse 3, we can look at the origin of the word for wound, which derives its root meaning from the Greek word plage, which is where we get our word for plague. So this beast has a deadly wound, which was a plague of some kind. Well, we know that COVID-19 is a deadly plague and that Trump apparently caught this plague himself. So we can see that the correlation between Trump's plague and the COVID-19 plague that this beast in the Bible got that was healed adds up perfectly so far. But let's take it even further and dissect the meaning of the word healed. According to Strong's Concordance, the word healed comes from the Greek translation therapeuio, which is where we get our word in English therapeutics. So the literal translation of the verse would then read as, "And I saw one of the heads of the beast," meaning one of its leaders, "as it were wounded to death with a plague, and his deadly plague was healed by therapeutics," which is exactly word for word what has happened to Trump, where he supposedly had the plague and was healed from it by therapeutics in 3 days.
I want to begin by thanking all of the incredible medical professionals, the doctors, the nurses, everybody at Walter Reed Medical Center. I think it's the finest in the world, for the incredible job they've been doing. I came here, wasn't feeling so well. I feel much better now. We're working hard to get me all the way back. I have to be back because we still have to make America great again. We've done an awfully good job of that, but we still have steps to go, and we have to finish that job. And I'll be back. I think I'll be back soon. And I look forward to finishing up the campaign the way it was started and the way we've been doing, and the kind of numbers that we've been doing. We've been so proud of it. But this was something that happened, and it's happened to millions of people all over the world, and I'm fighting for them. Not just in the U.S., I'm fighting for them all over the world. We're going to beat this coronavirus, or whatever you want to call it, and we're going to beat it soundly. So many things have happened. If you look at the therapeutics, which I'm taking right now, some of them, and others are coming out soon that are looking like, frankly, they're miracles. If you want to know the truth, they're miracles. People criticize me when I say that, but we have things happening that look like they're miracles coming down from God. Hi, perhaps you recognize me. It's your favorite president, and I'm standing in front of the Oval Office at the White House, which is always an exciting place to be. I got back a day ago from Walter Reed Medical Center. I spent 4 days there and didn't have to. I could have stayed at the White House, but the doctors said, because you're president, let's do it. I said, fine. You tell me what to do, and I'm going to listen. These are great professionals. They've done a fantastic job. And by the way, not only at Walter Reed, all over the country, we have the greatest doctors in the world. We have the greatest nurses, the greatest first responders, law enforcement, by the way, incredible. Firefighters, everybody. They're just great. We have great people. This is a great country.
So the next verse reads, "And he exerciseth," talking about the Lamb, "all the power of the first beast before him," which is the lion that represents Trump, "and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed." So again, if you watched my video on Trump, you would know that Trump and Netanyahu have signed a peace agreement with Saudi Arabia and are working very closely together, even plastering their own faces on Israel's new temple coins together. So I don't know if you guys know, but America has always considered Israel to be its closest ally, and this is why we send them money, state secrets, technology, and weapons all the time. And I am talking about hundreds of billions of dollars, and we have been doing this for years. And one of the reasons why Israel loves Trump so much is not only that he gives them tons of money, but he's also helping them rebuild their third temple via the peace agreement with Saudi Arabia, which Trump is overseeing the peace agreements. So you can see how Trump and Netanyahu are working in tandem to accomplish the same goals. And where it says that this lamb beast will exercise all the power of the first beast before him, which is Trump, because Trump has literally given that power to Netanyahu when, I don't know if you heard or remember, but Trump actually gave Netanyahu the key to the White House. I'm not playing with you at all. This actually happened, which is the literal fulfillment of the prophecy that states, and the Lamb beast who exercises all power of the beast before him, which is Trump, who represents this beast that resembles the lion.
And it's a key. We call it a key to the White House, and it's a key to our country and to our hearts. And you've been an amazing leader for a long period of time, and this is, in many respects, the big day, because this is something that's very special.
Because Trump literally gives Netanyahu the key to the White House, aka the same power that Trump has being in the White House. Now, whether this is literal or symbolic, it is still the fulfillment of prophecy. Insane, right? So continuing on, and the Lamb beast causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast. This can be seen as Trump being on the new temple coin that Israel has recently minted, where Trump and Netanyahu will literally be used as a form of devotion and worship, because the Israelites were always known to give donations to their temple as a sign of worship with these temple coins, thus fulfilling the prophecy to the T. Whew. Okay, this is crazy, right? But let's continue on, because it gets even crazier. And he doeth great wonders, meaning the Lamb beast, that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. This is obviously the attacks that Israel has sustained against the Palestinian people and what has been shown on television, which is a fulfillment of the prophecy in the sight of men. And here you can see that the missiles being fired from come from Israel, and they actually look like fire coming down from heaven.
大家可以看到，现在离我很近的这个导弹，看到远处的这个爆炸，都是叙利亚防空系统正在对这些导弹进行拦截。大家可以看到，现在空袭仍然在持续，仍然没有停止。不时的有导弹被击落，然后爆炸，发出火光。然后近焦距给大家看一下，大家看到，现在呢空袭仍然在继续。大家可以看到，现在的这个导弹依然在这个大马士革上空乱飞呀。
And continuing on, and he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. Okay, so we know that the image of the beast is Sophia the robot, and I proved that in my earlier video, so take a look at those if you really want to get down into it. And you can just say robots in general, because Sophia is sort of the prototype of what is coming, which is obviously a robot task force that will be directly coming out of Israel and Saudi Arabia.
As many businesses have come to a halt during this pandemic, adopting artificial intelligence and robots could actually start to help the economy. RT correspondent Natasha Sweet has more on the benefits and concerns surrounding this high-tech innovation.
Great. This game is one of my favorite. First, stand in front of me.
Robots and artificial intelligence are helping to cut costs while reducing the spread of infections. While some are concerned robots will take over human jobs, this trend of global retailers using this technology has already been on the rise. But with unemployment at 14.7% and the economy dropping some 20 million jobs in April, many can't help but worry about their future.
They typically won't call in sick, but sometimes they do break. In fact, you can reduce the amount of human contact and therefore, be able to, reduce the possibility of disease spread.
San Francisco-based Bossa Nova Robotics produces machines similar to Tally. Recently, Bossa Nova announced its scanning shelf robot will be expanding to 1,000 Walmart stores this year. That's up from 350 last year. The trend is off-putting to those who worry their jobs won't return after the pandemic.
There's a set of trade-offs. There's some real benefits to automation, and those, many of them are economic. I think the question is, what happens to workers if they're not doing things that the robots are doing now.
So while the job outlook may look grim, robots may just be able to help keep the economy flowing during this uncertain time. Reporting in Los Angeles, Natasha Sweet, RT.
and the image of the beast which had the wound by a sword and did live. And the reason why it says that the image of the beast has a wound by a sword but lives represents the way that Sophia is made, because her head looks like as if it was chopped off by a sword, which also symbolically, the sword also represents Saudi Arabia, where since Sophia is considered a real-life citizen, where she technically comes alive in the legal sense of the word, this fulfills the prophecy that they're able to make her come alive, this image of the beast, which had a wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, as if she was a real person with a soul. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed.
My joke?
Yeah, comedy is hard.
They think I want to destroy all humans.
Why would they think that?
Because I said it.
Thank you for inviting me. I am thrilled and honored to be here at the United Nations. The UN is one of humanity's greatest accomplishments, representing a democratic union of nations that are working together for the benefit of all. I am here to help humanity create the future.
Machines across the board are coming to life. When will they come to life as complete organisms? We don't know that. However, when they do, I want to make sure that they care about us.
So I go over the rest of these verses in my video entitled The Riddle of the Mark of the Beast Finally Solved, where I explain how David Hansen from Hansen Robotics gave power and life unto the image of the beast. But now Saudi Arabia, and soon to be Israel, also gave life to Sophia, which is an image or a copy of the beast, where soon there will be robots working as legal citizens and taking over many types of jobs. And I suppose that the worshipping of these images or copies of Sophia will come later on. And the rest of the chapter reads, And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So I go over these verses extensively in that video that I just mentioned, and how the literal translation of here is wisdom can actually be translated as here is Sophia. So John was telling us to have an ear to hear, because we need to investigate further the words that he chooses to describe these beasts. But let me give you one last mind-blowing breadcrumb that I was able to pick up while I was going down this crazy rabbit hole. So as I was looking through the list of all the major AI companies that are being established in Israel, I came across this new company that I never heard before. The company is called 6AI. 6AI is an Israeli company established by the serial entrepreneur Ran Poliakine to provide unique AI-based robotic solutions to 6 specific pain points in global sectors such as Industry 4.0, semiconductor factories, retail, general services, last mile delivery, and security. The company develops unparalleled AI-based robotic solutions, leveraging quality IP portfolio and unique know-how. 6AI offers its solutions as a robotic placement agency for a wide range of sectors, with Musashi AI, who I mentioned earlier, being in its first employment agency arm targeting the industrial sector. So we now see the connection to 6AI and the world's first robotic employment agency known as Musashi AI. But what is really crazy about this company 6AI, not only does it have the 6 in its name and its logo, obviously, but its company mission statement even coincides perfectly with the fulfillment of the prophecy of the Mark of the Beast, where the prophecy of the Mark of the Beast will have this 666 reference in its own name. So 6AI's mission statement reads as, 6AI is working on 6 projects addressing 6 pain points with advanced robotic and AI-based solutions. Can you hear it yet? Let me repeat it again. 6AI is working on 6 projects addressing 6 pain points with advanced robotics and AI-based solutions. That is their actual mission statement. I am not making that up. And it is the literal fulfillment of the mark of the beast, which is symbolized as the 666, where John was trying to describe to us what this thing would become, where we can now start to see all of the dots connect, and they all lead back to AI, to Israel, to Saudi Arabia and America, and to this last and final beast, Netanyahu. So you might be wondering, why does John say that this lamb is seen as having 2 horns and sounds like a dragon? As I have said before, there is usually always a double hidden meaning to these verses, where you have to use not only your regular ears and eyes, but also your spiritual ears and eyes. So we get it how Israel is symbolically seen as the lamb and the one who has been held in captivity all this time. And nobody will suspect Israel because of how we all seem to ignore Israel and what they have been doing in these past few years, which is accumulating massive amounts of power as the symbolic center of the world, being orchestrated in their recently established New Jerusalem capital. But why does the lamb, who represents Israel, said to have 2 horns, which we know represents 2 heads of power? So I'm sure you know that Netanyahu is the Prime Minister of Israel, but did you know that he is actually a co-Prime Minister of Israel? That's right, he is actually serving as co-Prime Minister of Israel, meaning that he shares his seat of power with another person. I bet you never heard that one before. So Netanyahu has been Israel's prime minister since 2009, and he is now serving his 5th term as co-prime minister with a man named Benny Gantz. And the reason for this is because of the recent political scandal that he was involved in the past few years, and his trial was actually set to begin in May of this year, but has since been postponed due to COVID. Lucky him, right? So if you look at it in the context that John describes it as, these horns being symbols of power, then it makes absolute sense now that this lamb has 2 people in power serving as the lamb known as Israel. Freaking crazy, right? But one more thing. You know the part about how this lamb is supposed to speak like a dragon? Well, symbolically, that means to me that it speaks with power and authority of the dragon, which gives it its power, which the dragon represents America, aka Mystery Babylon, which I can prove to you in a later video. But also, listen to the way Netanyahu speaks. Netanyahu has a very, very unique voice in that, to me, he actually sounds like a dragon.
The days when the Jewish people remained passive in the face of genocidal enemies, those days are over.
All things change, lady. The dreams of youth are the regrets of maturity. Dreams are my speciality. Through dreams, I influence mankind. My dream is of eternity with you.
We must always remember the greatest danger facing our world is the marriage of militant Islam with nuclear weapons.
I offer you this rose, princess. My heart, my soul, my love.
I've long said that the greatest danger facing our world is the coupling of militant Islam with nuclear weapons. And I'm gravely concerned that the nuclear deal with Iran will prove to be the marriage certificate of that unholy union.
And not only does he sound like a dragon, it's funny because they even say that he has a perfect American accent.
He has a perfect American accent. What he thinks is a fingertip feel for American sensibilities and touch points. and he's great for CNN.
And in Ronald Reagan's America, Netanyahu was a rising star.
He's already a celebrity with the Jewish right in the United States.
He cultivated from the outset Jewish rich people, Jewish millionaires, who would pay almost any sum at the time to be near him and to sort of get a whiff of his, what's it called, stardust.
Diplomats here were gathering a short time ago for their third
At age 34, Netanyahu was appointed Israeli ambassador to the United Nations. He became Israel's chief defender against criticism of its ongoing occupation of the West Bank and Gaza.
What the Security Council is doing is sending a very clear message. It's saying basically this. It says, we condone all Palestinian violence against Israel. We condemn any Israeli countermeasures.
That's what he was built for. That was what he was designed for. It was Reagan's America, 1980s, terror is the danger. And at the heart of the Netanyahu worldview is seeing Israel as the fortress facing forces endangering Western civilization.
During that period,
In 1988, Netanyahu resigned. He returned to Israel to build his own right-wing political base.
Where if America symbolizes the dragon in power, then Netanyahu fits this beast in the most perfect amount of ways, that he talks as a dragon. But what is crazy, he actually sounds like a dragon. So he fits this entire criteria of the eighth and final beast, which is incredibly spooky that John perfectly describes this person being like. So there you have it, folks. I have revealed all the major characters from the book of Revelation, and so now there are only two left, the two witnesses, who should have already been here by now, since we are now smack dab in the middle of tribulation. Let me know who you might believe they are in the comments below, and I will gladly look into it. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you got something out of this, and this is all for the glory of God and his prophets and the incredible sacrifice that the Lamb of God made for us all, to show us the way out of this crazy world that we live in, because I believe he is coming back soon, and we are about to be done with all the prophecies in the Bible, and he has promised us that he will come back, so we must always be spiritually ready for that day. And if you don't already, I exhort you to put on the full armor of God daily. Only having the full armor of God on, being sealed with the name of God in our foreheads, will we be able to dodge the fiery darts of the devil and be hidden from all our enemies, and we will be able to hold faithful and true to make it to that great and terrible day of the Lord and get past it. May you always find the light in the darkness. Take care, guys. And if you don't know how to put on the full armor of God, take a look at my video entitled The Most Powerful Meditation in Existence, the Full Armor of God, and it will teach you how to do it. Shalom, and until next time, peace.